thank you. It's a very difficult thing to follow that, really. But I'm talking on a similar sort of relationship between music and visual. But in reverse, I'm talking about visual being inspiration for music. What you just saw really was music inspiring visuals, and it's a very symbiotic relationship that goes both ways. I must say I'm very happy to be in Paphos, because Paphos, did I see someone say yes? Yes, thank you very much. Because Paphos for me, in Cyprus, hello, Paphos for me was where it all began, in Cyprus, in 1992. It was actually the first place I played in Cyprus as an MC, as a singer and DJ. And it's always had a very special place in my heart, really, artistically. So it's really good to be here in Paphos and not in the heat of Nicosia. Thank you, Angeliki, for organizing this in Paphos. My first degree was in government and sociology at Essex University. I realized that at some point I didn't want to be a politician, so I focused more on sociology. And ever since then, sociology has been a very important part of what I've been doing at the University of Nicosia in terms of communication and media. And also it's been a very important part in my writing as a musician, because the sociological imagination inspires a lot of my work. And I want to talk about this today as a case study in a chapter of my recent book, The Living Chiofta, some stories that come out of songs. And the chapter is called Wise Menas. It's a song that I've written that it's yet to be released. It will be released very soon, but it's available as a podcast, and it's also available in the book. I don't know what I did there. Right. Whoops. I'm not sure if this needs a new battery, but I'll do it like this. So usually the conventional approach is songs and sounds. All right. Looks the other way around to me. Songs and sounds, we craft songs as sounds, but what inspires songs is not just sound, it's also many other things that we witness or we experience. And my very unconventional approach of being an academic and also being a person involved with music has led many people to assume that this is a challenging position to be in, because I write papers about music, I do research about music, but I also make music, and then I do papers about making music, and sometimes very autoethnographic work about albums that I've made with people and stuff like that. And this is seen as a very difficult thing, because it's one thing being a musician and another thing being an academic. And these are two radically different worlds. As musicians, we're judged by audiences. As academics, we're judged by committees and ranking and all these things that we have to go through in a very hierarchical order of a university. And the world of doing research and writing academically, I've found over the last 20 years, that it's increasingly influencing my songs, and also my songs are increasingly influenced by academia and by my thoughts on academia. I suppose it's a bit of a privileged position to be in, because you've got the best of both worlds. So writing songs at this juncture in my life is something that is informed by academic work. and academic work is also informed by writing songs. Doing both, for me, requires a sense of vision, direction, and purpose. But it's taken me 20 years to realize this. And that sounds a bit strange, but I think as a practitioner in the songwriting process, you learn your craft as you go along, and you fine-tune things as you go along. And that's taken me quite a long time to come to terms with in terms of what is creativity anyway. You know, it's a question we've been asking for a very long time. Creativity can come from a word, it can come from an idea, an experience, a comment, can come from inspiration from belief systems, reading, adapting something. And it can also come from seeing something, and that's what I really want to talk about today. Thinking visually with sound in mind, and how we do that as people that are practitioners. And that's why visuals matter so much. The world of visuals matters so much to music, because music and visuals both tell stories. Images evoke emotion and imagination. Visuals are really good things for breaking writer's block when you're writing lyrics. There's a power, really, to seeing the lyrics as you're doing them, and seeing them and hearing them, and visualizing what you're singing, what you're creating. And that visual, for me, in your mind, is that spark or revelation. Finding that, really, in anything you do as a song is the key idea that unlocks the songwriting process itself. But where to start and how to develop it lyrically, and when and how to finish is very challenging. And all the rest that comes in between, of course. And Image has always had this relationship with popular music that goes back many decades. But there's a really good example that I came across in a recent autobiography by Chris Blackwell, the founder of Island Records, called Island Man. It's a fascinating book, which I strongly recommend. Grace Jones was well-known initially as a model, and she was well-known for releasing a few songs that were a little bit quiche, they were a little bit disco, and she's always been a very active performer, and also dresses a lot when she does her performances. And Chris Blackwell decided to sign Grace Jones to his record label. And in signing Grace Jones, he had an image for what he wanted, and he had that image previously, and this image had been developed by illustrator, photographer, and graphic designer, and formerly partner of Grace Jones, her lover, Jean-Paul Goude. And in the studio, when this album was being recorded for Island Records, Chris Blackwell, the owner of the company, told the sound engineer, I want this album, I want you to make it sound like it looks. And having that picture above the mixing desk, they came up with a specific sound that, with a very specific group of musicians at Compass Point Studios in Nassau in the Caribbean, which was radically different from anything else. And this is the person who recorded a wide variety of artists, including Bob Marley, Cat Stevens, Roxy Music, later on, released albums by U2. Blackwell has always been a bit of a visionary in terms of sound. There are many more examples of this, of course. The classic one being Santana's Abraxas album. This was based on a work of art from 1961 called Annunciation by a German-French painter, Matti Klavine. Santana saw it by chance in an art magazine, in an art gallery, and thought that's it, and it became the cover for their very highly acclaimed Santana Abraxas album, which was one of the early albums by the band Santana. which caused a lot of controversy, obviously. And it was also heavily censored by CBS at the time. They put a sticker on it. So visuals are triggers for songs. Photography gives us those frozen moments of emotion, paintings, color, abstraction, symbolism. We also get this from film and television, and narrative and cinematic inspiration. We get it from street art, from graffiti. I've traveled all over the world. I always take pictures of graffiti. I was in Croatia once, in Dubrovnik, about 25 years ago. And I went down to the beach and I climbed up this hill. I turned the corner and there's these 2 pieces of graffiti on 2 walls, Tupac and Biggie. And I thought I was in, I was in New York or somewhere, It was just a totally unexpected thing to see. And sometimes these sort of unexpected experiences, they happen, through what we see also in terms of fonts and calligraphy and the ideas that people have in the symbolism of fonts. A very good example of that is the fonts used by designer Neville Garrick, who sadly passed away recently, who designed Bob Marley's phenomenal album, Bob Marley and the Wailers' Exodus. And when this was taken to the record company, Island Records, they said, we can't release it like this. His face isn't on it, It's Bob Marley. He sells millions of records. And Bob Marley said, well, that's what I want it to look like. And it's this very simple Amharic font on a gold background. And it became the biggest selling Bob Marley and the Wailers album as an album. I'm excluding Legend because I don't consider that to be a Bob Marley and record. It was made after he died. Legend probably sold more copies than Exodus, I think. So that was more on calligraphy. I'll give you two examples that inspired me. One is a song that I wrote about Phan Thu Kim Phuc, who's the girl in this picture that I saw during the Vietnam War when I was a kid. This is a highly acclaimed photograph in photojournalism of a child that's just been bombed by napalm. It's a very famous picture. For most of my life, I never knew her name, and that's what the song's about. But the fact that we can mythologize so many things, but we don't even actually know people's names, but the image stays in our mind. And this is the only picture from my village, Marathovounos, which is in occupied northern Cyprus. And I was always, ever since I've been a student, this picture's been in my room. And it was taken, I think, in the 1950s from a helicopter or something. If there was helicopters back then, I'm sure there was. From a colonial aviation aircraft, shall we say. And this inspired a song called Marathovounos, My Village, which I recorded with Al Breadwinner from Manchester. He's a reggae producer there. So I believe that you got to see it and say it and then sing it. A couple of years ago, around this time of the year, usually around this time of the year, I go and play in London. I do a show there, more or less every summer. And I was walking down the street in Haringey, where I used to live, and I had this prompt in front of me on the street, which I took a picture with my mobile phone. And this thought came to my mind. I saw a crushed watermelon on a Haringey street. And my sociological imagination led me to think, well, how did it get there in the first place? I mean, it's impossible for watermelons to grow in the UK unless they grow them in greenhouses. The climate isn't right. So all the watermelons are brought in these massive trucks. I remember one of the Bakalliga in Haringey, I think it was called, the name began with a Michlis, I think was the name. Dan Haringey had this part where there was loads of Cypriots there. And in the summertime, these big articulated lorries would come from Greece or from Cyprus, probably from Greece. And they were full of watermelons and fresca, you know. People would go there and buy their batiches, you know, the karpouzi. And so my sociological imagination wanted to question this. And this goes back to the writing of C. Wright Mills in 1959, who's still a very relevant sociologist to this day, who came up with the idea of the sociological imagination, which is the ability to see connection between personal experience and society at large. It empowers individuals to understand how history, culture, and social forces shape their lives, encouraging critical thinking and awareness beyond personal circumstances or individual explanations. In C. Wright Mills terms, everything is connected. When we give this lecture in sociology classes, we always use the example of the cup of coffee. Every morning we drink a cup of coffee, most of us. But that cup of coffee that you're drinking, so many people took part in its making, from the people who picked it and got heavily exploited somewhere else in the world, to the way it traveled around the world, the way it's marketed, the way it ends up on your table right in front of you. So everything is this connected world. And that watermelon, like me, came from somewhere. And I wanted to understand that theme through the concept of migration, as somebody who's migrated twice. I was taken to London in the early 60s after the troubles in Cyprus in '63, and I went to live in London. And then in 1994, I decided to come back to Cyprus because I've always felt like this is my home. So these two processes of migration and having this feeling of still feeling like xenos, even in Cyprus sometimes, I felt it much more in England than I do in Cyprus. I wanted to explore this theme through this crushed watermelon. And then these lines came to me, lying right there beside me, right by my feet. So far from the place in which you grew, tell me, how did you get here? Kaimenon karpouzimo. This takes me back to a poem by Pavlos Liasidis. And today, when we was walking after our breakfast with Konstantinos, we came across this amazing monument in the municipal buildings just down the road here, which feels like it's a poetry fountain or literary fountain. And it's got all these famous poets from around the world. And I don't know why, I stopped at Pavlos Liasidis. It must be fate, because this man crosses my life for many years. For me, he's one of our national poets. Wrote a poem in 1933 called Xenithia, which we, on a previous project that I worked with Konstantinos and our very dear friend Zekiali, we did a collaboration in about 15 years ago, I think, in France, between people from Cyprus, France, and Morocco, where we adapted this poem into 5 different languages. And then we made it into a piece of music, which lasted for about 18 minutes. And it was an amazing performance. But suddenly I made this connection from an article that I'd written in 2015, which was about this poem by Pavlos Liasidis that came out of the project that we'd worked on. I made this connection in the first verse, and it relates a lot to the idea, the main concept of graphic stories this year, which is what one of the earlier speakers talked about, the symbolism of the tree, which I think is really important to understand, because I do believe that there is a tree in each one of us. And that took me back to this poem by Pavlos Liasidis, Xenithia, which talks about an apple tree. And this apple tree is uprooted from its natural ground on a little bervoluin somewhere, nowhere special, but it's uprooted and somebody decides to put it by the sea. And by the sea, the ground is very fertile. It's got a fantastic view. You can see the sea. And within 1 year, this apple tree dies because the concept of the poem really is Sandondobos su eneshi. And that stayed in my mind. And then I developed this chorus, Onirevo me alou, obo yesti obo patris, citizen, citizen of the world. Wise men become fools, and fools become wise men. It's a 3-part chorus, and that's a bit unusual in different languages, making it even more unusual. But to me, it really explores this concept of belonging and coming from somewhere, but also feeling free by this idea that we're all citizens of the world, no matter where we come from. But we live in a world where the wise men have become fools, and the fools have become wise men. And I say this because the theme of migration, what people call immigration, is a form of political capital, which people, usually on the extreme right, exploit for their own benefit, to pollute people's minds with misinformation, disinformation, inaccuracies, and basically lies about people from specific places. It all felt weird to me, these 3 choruses. It took me about 6 months to write this, but adapting it all and experimenting it. And then I made the scat, and the scat developed, and then that scat, it led me to question the music a little bit. I changed the music. I actually changed the keys from G, C, D, C, which was originally the chords, to ADE, which is more comfortable for my voice. And really, the song is about the indignation on migration and questioning the way it's being questioned, but how the futility of the world and how this has become political capital based on common sense lies by specific groups of politically minded people against specific groups of people singled out deliberately. And that's why the wise men have become fools. And that's why the fools have become wise men, because some of them get elected based on this too. And the way specific people exploit this troubles me as a citizen of the world. It has a lot of transmedia qualities, which I won't go into now, because what started out as a song became a podcast, and then it became a book, and then that becomes a live performance, and eventually I will record it again and release it as material. And the book is out in the front if anybody is interested in looking at it. So this sociological imagination is very important to me, and the visual is very important to developing that songwriting quality. And every image, some final thoughts, every image has a hidden rhythm. Visuals in songwriting activate my sociological imagination. This created a very strong link in my mind between migration as a lived concrete reality through a sense of empathy, rather than the usual way people do it, through a sense of antipathy towards specific people. There is a deeper connection between the personal and the political in songwriting. It's complicated though, and it's a process of unraveling and unpacking these things and figuring it out. Train your eyes to see, to listen, and your ears to see and imagine. Train your eyes to listen and your ears to see and imagine. Make visuals part of your creative process. See music, write emotion. Thank you.